So I think the topics that we are going to cover today. Good evening, Dr. Vinod. Vinod sir. Good evening. So the topic that we are going to cover today has already been mentioned in the Telegram group. People have lost trust in the traditional banking system, and that is why cryptocurrencies are picking up because of limited supply. Right. Today we are taking that discussion forward. That's the agenda. Over to you, Chaitanya Bete. God bless.
Thank you very much,
Eager
sir.
to hear you again. I will pull myself back with it.
Thank you very much, sir. With your guidance, I'll go ahead. Thank you, sir. So, sir, I'll just run through a small recap of last week, just so that we know where we are today. So, friends, if you remember, we spoke about where does money come from. We spoke about the truth of money. So does anybody remember where does money come from? Can we have something on the chat box? What is the origin of money? Thin air, amazing, amazing. Okay, great. So I think we're there. We can go ahead to a little bit more on the banking system, how this money from thin air is delivered to us, Federal Reserve, banking system, and then to our customer who gives it to us, or we get it as a loan, depending on what we do in our activities. This is fractional reserve banking. We give the bank 10 rupees, bank lends out 90 rupees from that. So it multiplies money. So not only the Federal Reserve or the central bank is multiplying the money, even our own bank is multiplying the money, as a recap. And when we are told by the banker, please remember that every time you visit a bank, okay, how many of us in the room today visit banks? Can you put an I in the chat box? How many of you actually go to a bank? Physically go to a bank to either take a limit or take a loan or take a cash credit, or rarely? Okay, so we have one answer so far, rarely. How many of us actually go to seek credit, to deposit? Okay, that's great, Vinodji, to deposit. How many of us actually have to go to the bank for taking a loan? Okay, how many of us take a loan through an app? Let's say that we have an Android app or an Apple app and we need short money. Let's say we need $4,000 for something, and or 2 lakh rupees or 4 lakh rupees for something, and we just pick it up through an app. How many of us do that? Okay. How many of us take a loan from any other source to run our business? Okay. How many of us run businesses here? Can we have a B on the chat box if you run a business or if you own an enterprise? Can you put a, okay, 1, 2. Okay. So 3. Okay. So a couple of people are there. There are a few people who are running businesses, and to them, I'd like to ask the question: do you take any kind of facility from the bank, either a cash credit or a term loan or any kind of loan against stock, loan against receivables, or any kind of facility to support your working capital requirements? Do you do that? Okay. So if you do that, can you put a Y on the chat box? Okay. So a few people do that, and a few of us don't, because we're probably running through our own, haven't taken anything yet. So out of the people who have not taken anything yet, how many of you believe that you're a debt-free company? Can you put D in the chat box if you think you're debt-free? Let's say that D. Okay. So a couple of people believe that we are a debt-free company. Okay. So in today's session, you and I are going to learn why, when we say we are debt-free, we're actually still in debt. Okay. So there is a traditional family managed business value that some of us have, that being debt-free is the best. Of course, that's the best because there's no pressure from the lenders and we can run our own business. There is no stress, sleep well in the night and all that, right? We learned all that as children when we entered the business. But things changed in the outside environment. And even when we were debt-free, we entered into the debt-laden monetary system. Today, we are going to learn how. Okay. So keep tuned and you will know at the end of the session that why, even when you believe you're debt-free, you're actually in debt. Okay. And then I'll take questions if you have any specific questions. So this system is called fractional reserve banking. Just recapping last week. This system is called fractional reserve banking. the bank takes $10, multiplies that, and lends out $100 from that. Okay, and this money again is created from thin air. So not just the central bank is doing that, but even a bank which is borrowing from the central bank ends up multiplying the currency, or the fictional currency is multiplied. Just recapping. Now, this is a further recap of the last session that we had. If you remember clearly, we spoke about gold-based monetary system. So if you see here today, dollar has always been treated as a reserve currency. But before 1971, dollar was still linked to gold. If you see here at the bottom of the screen, you will see gold over here. Okay, so this is here because dollar was linked through this thread to gold, and then everything else, all other currencies were linked to the dollar. And hence you had the entire world in a very stable kind of a monetary system, monetary environment. Itna uncertainty nahi tha, itna inflationary economies nahi tha. Things were a little simple. If you remember, in those days, we used to make 5-year plans. How many of you have made a 5-year plan? Can you put 5 in the chat box? How many of you have ever made a vision, strategy, mission statement, strategy sheet? How many of you have done that? If you've not done that, type no, type NO in the chat box. If you've made a 5-year vision, 5-year plan, type 5. If you've not done it, just say no. Okay. So some of us did that. You know, there was this whole concept of planning ahead of time and knowing what you're going to be 20 years from now, and then 5 years mein kya karoge, break down your goals, and you know, all of that planning used to be done. But today all of that is left redundant. The cell phone in your hand goes redundant in 6 months. The volatility that was earlier belonging to the financial markets today belongs to our daily life. We don't know the money kept in our bank account today will remain or not remain. We don't know when we get up in the morning whether the bank in which we have the money will be floating or not. That's the level of uncertainty that we've reached. And one of the primary reasons for that is that this thread over here that you see, which was linking the gold to the currency, and hence all the currencies of the world, this thread has got cut. Okay, so if you see here, the thread got cut in 1971 by this kind gentleman whose name is President Richard Nixon. So he was the one who became infamous with the Vietnam War and the lying tapes and all that. There were a lot of things that happened, but we'll keep it short because we're just recapping the system. So he was the one who got off the entire American economy, and hence, as a result, the entire world economy off the gold standard. They cut off the thread from gold, and gold was no longer reserve. And what became after that is known as fiat currency. And fiat currency basically meant that the entire monetary system is created out of debt. So many of us believe that we don't take debt. Many of us believe that I don't take debt, my company is debt-free, or personally I'm debt-free, and I don't take loans, and I don't do this, and I don't do that, which is true. We have kept certain standards in our personal lives or in our enterprises. But what has happened because of this global change in the environment is that money is no longer created out of value. Money is now created, or currency is now created out of debt. So every dollar or every rupee that is printed is debt. You are in debt every time the US prints some money, hands it over to your government, who then hands over your income back to the central bank as mortgage, and mortgages you, by the way, in order to take this money. So even though I may believe that I'm not in debt, at the end of it, I am in debt, though I don't know about it, because there is no transparency. Let's come, this is last session. We are now coming to the next part of the ongoing session, which is known as blockchain. How many of you have heard of blockchain? Can you put B in the chat box if you've heard of blockchain? Okay, we have a few people. Okay, if you've heard of blockchain, put B in the chat box. What have you heard of blockchain? Can you please tell me? limited. Okay. So in a limited way, Vinodji or Vaibhavji, what have you heard about blockchain? What do you think is blockchain? It is a system where every transaction in a timeline is recorded. Okay, fair point. Okay. Okay. No idea to explain. Fair enough. It is not centralized. Okay. So it is largely decentralized. Good point. Okay. What else do you know? Mehulji says that it's not centralized. Great. What else do you know about the blockchain? Vaibhav says that it's a system where every transaction in a timeline is recorded. It has 2 keys. Okay. So that's how you use. So Mehul, you're probably referring to Bitcoin, isn't it? Tagging. Okay. Very good. Okay. Vinodji says tagging. Okay. So let's just go into Bitcoin is a product that comes out of blockchain. All of the answers are amazing answers. Congratulations to all of you. You heard quite a lot about blockchain. But let's go into the basics of blockchain. We're not right now discussing the products that come out of blockchain, which is basically the digital currency, or what you kindly right now you're calling it Bitcoin, or you're calling it Ethereum, or whatever else that we are calling it as a product. What we're discussing right now is blockchain. Blockchain it works on a central premise of transparency. Okay. And like one of us used in the chat box the word, it's not centralized. It is largely decentralized. And do you know to what extent it is decentralized? Can somebody tell me in the chat box to what extent it is decentralized? And where does it exist? Where is this blockchain? Where can I find a blockchain? Where can I get hold of a blockchain? Can you please tell me? So a blockchain, yes, good answer, Mehul. Every transaction can be sought can be sought by any entity associated. Okay. So guys, what's a blockchain? Blockchain is nothing but ledgers. Okay. These are all ledgers. Ledgers are created in a computer system. Okay. And they're all interlinked with each other. Okay. All of these ledgers are interlinked with each other. So what happens is that every time I create one ledger, okay, that ledger gets linked to the previous ledger that got created in the system. It's nothing but a software. This basically eliminates the middleman. Okay. How does it do it? Okay. We will pause the concept of blockchain and we'll go a little deviated from what we are doing right now with the current currency. Okay. The current currency has middlemen. Do you agree? You either have a bank, or you have a central bank, or you have let's say you're in the music industry, then you have a music company, you have let's say you're an artist, okay, and you want to take some you want to sell your art. Where do you do it? You'll go to an art gallery, you will pay some commission there. You'll go to an art agent, you'll pay a commission there. You'll go to some person who can like auction your art, and then you'll pay some commission there. And the person who wants to buy will buy it through Sotheby, will buy it from Sotheby, you will sell it to Sotheby, and all of that you will do. Okay. What this central decentral ledger system does is it eliminates the middleman. There is no middleman. If I want to send you money, I send you money through what is known as creating one ledger. I create, let's say, a book, or I create a page, and that page is linked to all the millions of pages that I've got created before it with a timestamp. And it is not centralized in one computer. This ledger, or this page, or this book is created as a link to all the other previous books that were created in this by software with timestamp and with codes, so that if somebody tries to hack into that computer system and tries to create a page in between two pages, basically that becomes the currency. Okay. If somebody tries to hack that, okay, they cannot do it. They cannot enter between two pages. Okay. So that is the basic technology of what you have heard so far is Bitcoin. Okay. So Bitcoin is just one product that comes out of blockchain. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back in our slide and come back to the concept of blockchain. What blockchain does is it creates assets. Okay, what does it create? It creates assets of contract. It creates assets like art. It creates assets like energy. It creates assets like money, intellectual property, contracts, other financial assets, bonds, stocks, everything. Okay. This central method of tracking the monetary supply, in a sense, what you're doing is you're tracking the monetary supply through software ledgers, which cannot be hacked into, and hence that ensures originality. Okay. And every time I pay you, supposing I pay you by blockchain, I'm giving you that ledger in your name, and nothing remains with me. And that ledger, that code, becomes your currency, and it is linked to all the other currencies that were generated just before it, right up to the starting point of that currency. Okay. And this is facilitated by software. So anybody who understands software understands that it is very easy to duplicate software. So tell me, why is it not just easy to just create your own currency? Like, let's say that there is Bitcoin, and let's say there are does anybody know the current value of Bitcoin right now? Does anybody own a Bitcoin or Ethereum? Okay. So Ganiji, do you own a Bitcoin? Mehul, do you own a Bitcoin? Okay. Does anybody own a Bitcoin? Okay. Fair enough. So let's just understand this. Only bits and coins. That's a good one, Ganiji. So let's get this. Why can't we just create a software? Like, we've got so many software, I suppose, illegal in India. Okay. So we'll come to that, Nishaji. About the legality of it, we'll come to that. Now the question is, why can't we just create it? Isn't it so simple, guys? We have got so many software engineers. Why can't we just create our own ledger? Like, we just have to mark it with the code, and we'll just have our own currency. I mean, it's $11,000 and $12,000, and maybe it jumps up to $20,000. Sometimes it's $2,000. It fluctuates according to the demand, obviously. But exchange should be acceptable. So why can't I make it acceptable, Ganiji? Why can't I just create something on software? Since it's just a ledger, I've got a nice computer. Why can't I just create a ledger and just that's my Bitcoin, and I'll just give it to you as currency? Why can't I just do that? What's the problem? It's so simple, right? Like, banking notes के वक्त तो थोड़ा problem था कि वो printing का machine होना चाहिए, उसमें वो color आना चाहिए, उसमें watermark आना चाहिए. All of that has to be there in order for you to feel satisfied that this is a genuine currency that is being printed by Reserve Bank of India or by the Federal Reserve. Now there is no problem. This is just a ledger. I can create a ledger on my computer. Now what's the problem? Trust, Vinodji. So what do you mean by trust? You mean to say that people are not doing it because they want to retain trust of the system, of the ledger system? So how many people will do that? Some people will crack it, right? They will say कि मैं बना के देता हूँ ledger. आपको कितना ledger चाहिए? It should be acceptable to everyone, not just between two entities. That's a good point, Ganiji. Trust leads to acceptability. Fair point, Vinodji. But supposing I give you something that I create, Vinodji, in my system, why is it not trustworthy? I'll give you a nice looking ledger. It will look very beautiful. It will look as good as a Bitcoin ledger. And the code will also be very nice. But why am I unable to do it? Ability to honor. Okay. But then what's the honor? Once I give you the code, you can just give that code to somebody else as payment, right? What's there to honor here? Exchangeability. Okay. So once I give it to you and you give it to somebody else, encashment. Okay. So let's say I give it to you, Ganiji, and Ganiji, you give it to Vinodji, and Vinodji then goes to encash it. What will be the difficulty? What do you think? Exchange Bureau. Okay. So let's get into this. Why people are not able to do this is because that software, that ledger, okay, is locked to all the millions of computers all around the world. Okay. Let's say that I created a code. I mined some Bitcoins. We'll come to the concept of mining later on. But let's say that I got a Bitcoin and I have a code. Okay. And somebody tries to duplicate it and give it to you. The difficulty is that along with my code, what you will get is the history of the entire currency, let's say that we are talking about currency right now and not contracts, you will get the history of what sometimes in property documents we call chain of documents. How many of you know chain of documents? Can you type C in the chat box? How many of you know chain of documents? How many of you bought property and know the value of chain of documents? Like जब से प्रॉपर्टी बना है तब से लेके अभी तक उसके कितने ओनर थे, कितने लोगों ने लिया, बेचा, रखा, whatever, store of value, appreciation, depreciation, whatever. There's an entire chain of documents that is sometimes required to register your Satbara and all that. So how many of you know it? Can you type C in the chat box if you know what is chain of documents? Okay. So like in a property, yeah, Vaibhavji, that is, so you've done it. So you know that we need to have history. When you own a property, you need to have history. You need to know everything about that property, right from the time the property was created. A builder built it, or a land was there owned by somebody. So you go right up to the historical record and bring it right down to this day, and you try to understand that what is the chain of ownership, so that there is no confusion. बाद में कोई उठ के ये नहीं बोलना चाहिए कि ये मेरा property है, right? That's the reason you go through chain of documents, so that there is legitimacy to what your ownership rights are. In the same way, in a blockchain asset, or let's call it a Bitcoin, just to make it easier to understand. In a Bitcoin, what happens is that you tend to when you are giving your Bitcoin to somebody else, you're also giving the chain of all the previous Bitcoins or all the previous ledgers that got created, and this gets stored in millions of computers simultaneously at the same time. Are you with me? This is the difficulty which you will have if I give you a Bitcoin generated by me. Because let's say that I will make friendship with 3 people who have Bitcoins in their computers. I'll get them to change the records in their computer by saying that this Bitcoin that I generated in my ledger, my software, you please add it to your record that this is a true, genuine Bitcoin. I can do it with 3, I can do it with 5. But this record exists simultaneously in millions of computers at the same time. And if I have to change the history of ownership of this Bitcoin or history of creation of this Bitcoin, I have to change it simultaneously in millions of computers worldwide. This is the difficulty with this ledger system. Why it is very difficult to manipulate it. Why it is very difficult to create a fictitious asset by me, that I cannot create something from my computer, even though it's just a simple ledger. I cannot do it because I cannot generate the history of the transactions I don't have that. I don't have the entire history of the origin of Bitcoin and everything with me, and all of this recorded simultaneously in all the computers. I cannot do that. There are millions of computers. How do I do that? This is what gives legitimacy in today's world to this technology of Bitcoin. Creation of ledgers and establishment of these ledgers simultaneously in millions of computers everywhere at the same time. So anybody who tries to fake a record, fake a contract, fake a music payment, or fake a Bitcoin, a currency, Ethereum, whatever I try to fake, I cannot do it. Today, if I have to fake a currency, I can just print it in my machine and hope that somebody will take it. And once it is out from my system, then, it's out. I get my value and I'm out. Here, I cannot do that because this record exists simultaneously everywhere. How do I undo millions of computers' records in one go? I cannot do it. I don't, as an individual or even as a corporate, I don't have those resources. How many of you know traceability in printed notes? True. Very true, Vaibhavji. Very true. Even though if the CIA wanted to trace it, it's very easy. If the RAW wanted to trace it or some agency wanted to trace it, it would be very easy for them. But you and I as individuals would find it very difficult to trace a printed note. Kya pata kahan se aaya? Some duplicate note has come and now it is stuck in my hand and now nobody is willing to take it. So this 500 rupees which I have in my hand, it's finished. It's a loss for me because I accepted that as payment. Okay. So you're right, Vaibhavji. In a printed note, it's very difficult to establish this path of where did it originate. But in a blockchain-based system, even if it's a contract system or a monetary system or a monetary supply system, it's very difficult, first of all, to break through and create a copy. Because if I try to create a copy, I can do it in my computer and 3 other computers. I cannot create it in millions of computers at the same time, because these ledgers are existing and this entire chain of records are existing in millions of computers at the same time. It's very difficult to do it. Somebody may in the future find an algorithm to do it. At this point of time, this is very difficult to do in the current system that we have. So this gives a little stability to this technology, which we call blockchain. How many of you are with me? Can you please type B in the chat box? The reason we are discussing blockchain and the reason we are discussing this digital currency, because you must have heard the entire media talking digital India and digital this and digital that. We are heading towards a completely digitized world in the next few years. How do you transact then, Vinodji? What you do in a, let's say it's a Bitcoin oriented world, you just pay by Bitcoin. You pay somebody through an email. You just send the code through an email and that's your payment. That code is irreplaceable. It cannot be created again. That is a unique code which you had with your, of course, login ID and password. You give it over to the person you are making the payment to. That's how the transaction happens in a digital currency. But remember, this digital currency is not just used, this blockchain technology is not just used as digital currency. Remember that this is used as, now people are finding applications for blockchain, even in contracts that you make. Let's say that you're trying to make a contract with somebody, okay? So what they're devising methods, some of the companies have already done it, but contracts will be done on blockchain. Anything you write between two people will now appear through blockchain technology, so that it cannot be later on said, okay, I did not do this or you could not do this. It is there. It's there forever. That contract exists and it cannot be duplicated. It cannot be changed. It cannot be altered. That's a contract. People are even making like, you know, the music labels earlier used to hire singers and, pay them some yearly contract money, and then they would have songs coming out, and then they would get a portion of the earnings or not, depending on how things go, how strong their negotiations are. But musicians or even artists today are tapping this technology of blockchain and trying right now selling their products through the blockchain technology. So let's say that you buy an artwork of some famous painter. He will say, you pay me by blockchain, let's say Ethereum or Bitcoin. And he will put up his painting, the transaction of that painting will happen between you and him with nobody in between. There will be no intermediary, no middleman, as we saw here. There will be no middleman. You will be directly dealing with the painter, and he will send you this painting. You will send him the money, and there will be no need for a Sotheby to auction that painting to you. It'll be yours with nobody in between. And this is not just happening in, these transactions are not just happening in paintings, in music. These transactions are happening even in sending money. Like, how many of you heard of Western Union? Can you type W in the chat box? There you go. So Western Union as a concept is what? It's just basically sending money, right? You give him money here, and his office can give that money theoretically within, let's say, an hour or 2 hours or 10 hours to the person on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean very easily, because they will just send in an email that we received the money here. So from their own funds, they'll give you the money there. In our system, we used to call this Hawala. How many of you have heard Hawala? Yeah. So we used to have this, a very efficient system. Of course, it got affected by the other problems that come along with cash handling systems. But Western Union was a very legal way of doing that, where you could just receive money in point A and just give money in point B. But remember, you had to go to Western Union. But Shreyans, if you wanted to give this money to Ganiji, you would have to go to Western Union to do that. Now what they are doing with blockchain is that Shreyans wants to send some money to Ganiji. He just sends it through blockchain. And there is nobody in between. They are creating environments where this money will travel to Ganiji, and Ganiji will have somebody who can encash that money near him, very similar to what Western Union does. And they will just come and deliver the money to your house, or you can just go to their place if it is nearby. For, let's say, in India so far, what they've devised is a 2%. I can come. Yes, that would be nice to collect it. 2% is the cost they've kind of kept it right now. But as more blockchain applications come in this direct transfer method, you will find that the costs will keep going down because there are no intermediaries, so to speak, over here. The money travels to you through this blockchain technology, and you just keep going ahead. That's the beauty of a blockchain. Now, the reason we are devoting the first part of this session to blockchain is because so far we know about the gold-based currency, then we know about the fiat currency where it is created out of thin air. And now we are talking about Bitcoin, which is the next generation of money where things are becoming digital. That's the reason Geo is coming up with GeoCoin. So we keep hearing about it since some time, or most probably it will come anytime. Because as I think as one person famously said, that I do not care what are the politics of the country. You give me control of the money supply, and then I don't need to control anything else. That controls everything of the world. So everybody right now is in a chase to digitize currencies and to get into blockchain and make their own currencies. So Geo will be their own currency, Bitcoin is its own currency, Ethereum is its own currency. Contract systems that are coming based on blockchain, because they're extremely secure, you will find that in the next couple of months or in the next couple of years, you will start hearing this, that everything is now, blockchain based. They will ask you to sign contracts online, which would be blockchain contracts. You will buy music through blockchain. You will buy paintings, artworks, creations. A lot of people will tell you that, this is my blockchain address, and you send the money here through either Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever. And this is a contract. Let's just do it on blockchain. Data. Okay. How many of you know that data is the new oil? Can you type O in the chat box? So every time we are transacting something, please remember we are creating data. Mukeshji ventured, yes, Ganiji, very true. That is very true, because data is the new oil. And why is data the new oil? Because data is basic control of the entire population. Yes, that is why Reliance is getting into the new oil. That is very true. Because remember, every time I'm making a transaction, every time I'm talking to you right now, data is getting generated about me, about my personality, about how I do things, what I talk, what I don't talk. All this gets captured into central servers. They filter the data. They have my numbers, name, email, where I live. Google will give them locations of where I've been in the last 20 years, exactly which points at what time I was there, and what are my habits, what are my spending habits, what are the lows, what are the highs. So there is something called surveillance capitalism. How many of you have heard of surveillance capitalism? Can you type S on the chat box if you heard of surveillance capitalism? N. So that's a no. Vinoji. Others, anybody has heard about surveillance capitalism? So I'll tell you in short. Okay, surveillance capitalism is nothing but capitalism that is directed towards tracking the population. So Google will track where you are, your phone will track where you are, your location services will be on. All this data gets captured in central servers of Google, who then pass it on to CIA. They make a package out of it, and then they make habits out of you, that what are your highs, what are your lows. And depending on that, you're either a threat to the system or you're an asset to the system. You're a compliant behavior person, you're an opposing behavior person. And in China, using this data, they have created what is known as citizen credit system. So if you're a good citizen, that is, you agree and comply with the surveillance capitalism method, if you agree and comply with everything that the government or the Communist Party of China expects you to do, then you are given more credits. You get more marks, like we give to children marks. So you get more marks, and basis of that, you're allowed to travel, not allowed to travel. You can buy a ticket, you can't buy a ticket, all of that. And the cameras and CCTVs are so precise over there, based on this concept of surveillance capitalism, that they can find you within 20 inches of where you are. That precise location devices and GPS devices and all that. So all of this is important in this emerging new global order, because as the state starts losing power, and the state has lost most of its power, and this power starts shifting towards the banking economies, the banking as the new, has a stranglehold on the economy. And banking now starts deploying new methods, new technologies to gain control of how to make sure that you are compliant to everything that they require out of you. Okay, that's where the surveillance capitalism comes in, and that's where blockchain comes in. Okay, where everything is digitized in such a way that everything that you do is visible, transparent, and can be captured as a data point, which then is captured as a behavioral mechanism by data mining companies, and they convert this through artificial intelligence. How many of you heard of AI? Can you type AI in the chat box? There you go. So then, excellent. Now, a lot of us have heard of AI. Great. So then artificial intelligence technologies are used to mine this data and create products which they can sell to you, which is one part, where products are sold to us. Let's say that you're feeling very low, and they know through data that 7 p.m. you usually have a low, or they come to know through your email exchange that you're going to Atlanta, or you're going to some place where there's snow. So suddenly Amazon will show up a snow jacket to you, where it'll be shown as a 40% discount. So all of this is done through artificial intelligence and data mining. But this does not get limited to just selling your products. It gets limited to identifying who you are, what you are, and whether you are compliant or not. Okay. So these are the various technologies that get deployed, and this will start coming up more and more in our daily lives. Blockchain is one of it, okay, and Bitcoin is one of it, okay. We are going now further into understanding a little bit more about what this Bitcoin does. Now, if you see this image here, or what this blockchain does, if you see this here, these are the computers that are interconnected with each other. So if you see here, it is not just one computer talking to the other. If you see here, this computer is connected here and here, and this computer is connected here. But this computer is also connected here, and this computer is also connected here, and here, and here, and here. If you see here, this complex network of computers that are getting created everywhere through this blockchain technology, this complex computing that is happening, this has created a new opportunity of what is known as data mining. Okay, so a lot of data is mined in order to create these Bitcoin ledgers and create these blockchain ledgers. And for this mining, there's an entire industry that does only mining. That means they give their spare computing power, and that computing power, when they give it, they earn Bitcoins or they earn Ethereum out of it. So how many of you have earned a Bitcoin or an Ethereum through mining? How many of you have done that? Has anybody in this room done that? Have you ever allocated a part of your computer, empty computer reserves or empty computer systems for doing the mining? Like, this mining needs to be done. It requires a lot of computing power. So imagine this, guys. Okay, why it requires computing power? Let's just get into that. Imagine this: that which is the largest computing Silicon Valley company you know? Like biggest, like they have millions of computers, they have thousands of computers, and hard disks and Microsoft. Okay. So Nisha ji says Microsoft, Vinod ji says Amazon WS, IBM, Vaibhav ji says, okay. And some of us may say Google as well, because Google effectively became the largest just some time ago, because they kind of, they put up these huge computing servers. But of course, Amazon then is catching up, and so is Microsoft and the others. So imagine this, 10 to the power of 1,000 times bigger is the blockchain deployment of computing power. Okay. So anything that Google has created, or Microsoft has created, or Amazon has created, anything that any of these big giants has created, 10 to the power of 1,000, okay, that's the amount of computers that are being used, or computing power that is being used for this blockchain. That's why they say that blockchain is also democracy. Blockchain is also transparency. And blockchain is not in any central place. Okay, it's not in a particular head somewhere. It's there in all the computers simultaneously. That's why they say that, because all the computers, let's say that today night, let's say 10 p.m. onwards, this computer is going to be free. And let's say that I just allocate this computer for mining. So from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. today and tomorrow, this computer will become a part of the mining process for Bitcoin. That is the computing chip, the RAM, the hard disk, and everything and the internet will be used by miners and creators of the blockchain currency. Let's say I give it to Bitcoin for mining. Okay, that's how this is done, and that's how people have created this entire industry within the blockchain environment of allocating resources for blockchain. Of course, blockchain is a very wide field, so we will not get into that because we have limitation of time. But this is what, it is in brief for us to understand that this is where we are heading. Okay, so banks are collapsing, banks are becoming irrelevant. You can't trust anymore where you kept your deposit, and you don't know when you wake up in the morning whether they'll be there or not. And everybody is now moving towards, we are in the transition phase towards blockchain. Okay, if you see here, you will realize that all of this blockchain, each block is linked to the previous block and to the previous block in a chain. So if you see here, it is impossible. So if I am on this end, okay, of the blockchain, let's say that I received a contract here or a currency here at this end of the blockchain, okay, and I go here, I can see what happened here while I have this currency ledger with me. I can see all the ledgers. I can see everything of the past. All these ledgers are visible to me as transparency. So it is very difficult for me to duplicate all this. If you see here, I cannot duplicate so many ledgers. I cannot create so much of duplication. There are millions of ledgers, millions of transactions, millions of entries. It is impossible. That is why blockchain is becoming what it is becoming now. It is becoming irreplaceable as a technology. And even some of us who find it difficult, like, when I heard it first, I found it extremely difficult 10 years ago when I heard about this, and my friend was getting into it and he told me about it. It just blew my mind. I said, how are you going to do this? This is impossible. But as I kept learning, and as I think all of us will, we will realize that this is the way things are headed. So I may be used to using a particular credit card or using hard currency, and I want to just pay by that, but I will have to learn this is how money is reappearing. Money is changing form. This is what money is becoming now. Okay. So this is where we are in terms of blockchain. These are the applications of blockchain. Okay. You can have your land record rights in it. You can have music labels who will sell through it. There are like dozens of applications in blockchain. Okay, currency is just one of them. Like Bitcoin is one of them, Ethereum is one of them, but land records are there. So if let's say you own a land and then somebody says, the government tomorrow gets up and says, ye land tumhara nahi hai. So you can go to that particular blockchain application and show the entire chain of records. Whatever the government says is immaterial, whatever any land grabber says is immaterial, because that cannot be replaced by anybody. It cannot be duplicated. You cannot be deleted from the system by a bureaucrat or by somebody who says, "Ke tum nahi ho system mein, I don't recognize you anymore." It cannot be done. That's why land records are there, currencies are there, music labels are coming there, contracts are coming there. Data is being democratized that way, that today data is owned, your data is owned by Google or by Reliance or by Jio or by Microsoft or by somebody. What they are finding is that they are creating applications through blockchain where your data will be owned by you. And even if you purchase something from somebody, that blockchain based application will let out very minimum data to that seller who is selling you something. Let's say Amazon or somebody who is selling you something. He need not even know your name. All he will know is whether you have paid him or not. That's it. And once that transaction is over, that person will not know anything more about you. So your data becomes your own property, so to speak, your own data. And then, of course, then you're free to do whatever you want with it. You want to sell it, or anything else that comes to your mind. But that's what they are attempting to do. That's what the attempt is by so many applications. So Karamveer ji says about trademark or copyright. Karamveer ji, your question is not very clear. Can you be more specific on the question? I'm not very clear on that. What do you mean by that? So Advait is asking, does it mean that the entire transaction history could be seen? Yes, the transaction history can be seen. That is correct, Advaitji. The chain of records can be seen. The entire past of that currency can be seen. That at what time it was sold, and there's a timestamp on it. There is a transaction stamp on it. Obviously, everything else is protected, but it cannot be duplicated. Okay. Can trademark or copyright records be also recorded? Can trademark or copyright records be also recorded? Yes, yes. That's where we are going, Karamveer. That's where we are headed. Privacy. So, Nishaji, privacy becomes extremely important in blockchain. So, if you will notice, I mentioned every time that there is a timestamp and there is a transaction stamp. It does not mean that all the previous owners are exposed. What it only exposes is that the validity of your currency, what it validates of your transaction, of your blockchain entry or your ledger, there is a validity of timestamp, there is a validity of when it was done, how it was done, but there is nothing that exposes you as a person. It does not expose you or where you live or what is your name or nothing. It just ensures that there is nobody who can come in and say that, let's say I made a transaction at 8:04 p.m. today, and nobody can come and say that 8:02 I had one more transaction before Chaitanya did. It cannot be done because there is a history that exists in everybody else's computer that the transaction for this particular blockchain or this particular block of the chain. Remember, in software language, when you create a page, it is called block. Okay, or when you create a ledger, it is called block. That's why blockchain. So chain of blocks, chain of pages. So you're creating a chain of pages. That's why this is called blockchain. So your privacy remains protected. What only cannot be done is this chain cannot be broken. It cannot be cut, because anybody who tries to cut the chain, as I said earlier, will have to go through the million computers who are storing this information right now, and it will be impossible to do. So privacy is protected, and so is the security of your asset. Because remember, we discussed in the previous session that the asset that the Federal Reserve says is a physical asset. Like many of us think that the money that I have is an asset, or the house that I have is an asset. But like we realize as we study the debt-based monetary system, neither the money that I have in my hand is an asset, because that's a debt. Okay, even though I didn't take it as a debt, I got it as an income, but it has got printed as a debt. The birth of that currency is debt. Okay, so that's an asset that got created by the Federal Reserve, fictitious asset that got created. And blockchain is also an asset at the end of the day. Because when you're creating a contract or when you're creating a currency and somebody says that Bitcoin was $1 when it started and $2 and now it is $11,000. So all this appreciation that is going on within Bitcoin or Ethereum or the other currencies, All of this is value creation. But at the end of it, please be aware that the value is there because the number of people who are participating has crossed a certain threshold. Okay, that's the reason there is value. Tomorrow, if let's say a majority of the people exit the monetary supply, let's say that out of the 7 billion people who are existing on planet Earth, 4 billion say that I don't trust the US dollar anymore. I will not trade in the US dollar. What will happen to the US dollar? Can anybody tell me what will happen? Can you put it up in the chat box? In your opinion, what will happen? Let's say 3 billion of us say, 4 billion of us say that I don't trust in the US dollar anymore. I don't want to transact in the US dollar. It will collapse. Okay? It will just crash. Yes, Shreyansi. Because World War, that is very true. Because the US military would want to enter into all the countries that are saying no. Okay? But supposing all the countries are saying yes, but the population is saying no, what do you do? Okay, so always remember the base of the currency is there because you trust it. Your bank is standing today because you trust it. State Bank of India is standing because you trust it. But if all the depositors of State Bank of India say, no, I want my money back, there's no bank in the whole world that can do it because they have created money out of thin air. There is no way to give it back. How do you give it back? That's why they say a bank will crash if everybody goes to ask for their money back. How can they give it? They cannot give it. So trust is the basis of a system. Our previous system, which is already collapsed, and some people still believe in it, and they're thinking that it will recover, and governments will save the banks, and all of that people are thinking, and let's see what they do, but they don't seem to be heading in that direction. This new system, which is evolving right now as a replacement system to the world's monetary supply, this system, even this system is based on trust. You will have to trust it. There's a certain number of people when it crosses, when it crosses a certain number of people trust the system. That's when the system starts working. That's when it starts appreciating in value, and then everybody wants to hold a Bitcoin or an Ethereum or whatever. Okay, there is a certain threshold that has to be crossed. Okay, that's what gives it the value. So remember, still, even though this is created by ledgers and all that, still the value comes from the observer, like in quantum physics. It is the observer that creates the reality. The reality is not objective, and neither is currency, and nor is Bitcoin or any blockchain-based technology. It comes from the fact that you're observing it or you're trusting it. Okay. So are there any questions regarding this? What will be the benefits of investing in Bitcoin? So Nishaji, like any other investment portfolio, the Bitcoin is also prone to the risks of ups and downs. Okay. So Bitcoin is becoming the new frontier right now. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the other digital currencies that are getting created, they are becoming the new frontier. So a lot of people are investing in these digital currencies, in these blockchain-based technologies. So obviously, as an investor, what you're looking for is appreciation, and that's what people are getting. They're getting appreciation, but still, you have to study it. It's not doesn't mean that tomorrow you can go and invest in Bitcoin. It is important for us to understand what Bitcoin is, or what Ethereum is, or what any other digital currency is, and we have to get a little bit of understanding of how blockchain works, and how things are. Because just because somebody has got Bitcoin at $50 and today his Bitcoin is standing at $11,000 or $10,000, as we keep hearing it in media and everywhere else, it does not mean that the same is going to happen with us, that we will enter the Bitcoin at, let's say, 11,000 and then it's going to reach $20,000. We don't know. We don't know, because the volatility of buying and selling pressures also exists for Bitcoin, also exists for digital currency like Ethereum and blockchain-based currency. At the end of the day, it is humans who are manning this operation. So it's not like software is doing it and it's stable and all that. It's not, because humans are manning it. So there's buying and selling, there is highs and lows. So there is a risk. So any risk must be calculated, must be studied thoroughly and understood before we enter into this thing called the blockchain. So the dark web is a lot of black market. I think you're writing, Shreyans. Yeah. So a lot of the dark web is where the technologies come from. Okay, the dark web is where things get created. So the software hackers, the smart guys in the software, wrong to enter that zone. Okay, so so that zone is basically, you know, where all the experts, software people, the people who create softwares, who create hardware, create hardwares, the guys, the tech savvy guys. Okay, they remain in that space and they create technologies. Many of these free technologies like Linux or like, you know, all these, they all come from the dark web. And you will not believe this, but your Apple phone comes from the dark web. Okay, Apple was not created by Steve Jobs. Okay, he modified something which was available in the dark web, and he modified that further. That is, the Linux-based system was modified because it was a free-to-use system, and it was modified, and then it was kind of given a better look and nice approachability and user interface, which was appreciated and created as the world's most user-friendly software back, I think back in 2008, if I'm not wrong, when it was launched, 2007, 2008, when the iPhone was launched. So the entire creation of this easy-to-use software comes from this space where all the experts kind of interact with each other. And of course, the governments don't like this because they don't like to listen to the government, and they are all generally all rebels who want to not comply with government requests of, you know, tracking people. Because all the companies that work out of Silicon Valley, remember, one of their first jobs is like it is a job of Huawei in China, is to track the people. And so this is what Google does, Facebook does. Facebook checks what you do, at what time you do. They check your the retina, they check your palpitations, they check your breathing, all of that. These new technology mobiles and these Alexa and all that, they do that. They check you. So all of this is used as tracking data by these agencies. So most of these companies do that. And these people in the dark web generally don't appreciate this kind of thing, and they have this rebel nature. And of course, then there are some people in the dark web who are these hackers who like to hack systems and hack into banking systems and hack into Federal Reserve systems. And so there is this mix breed that exists in the dark web, where a lot of creativity is there, but at the same time, a lot of people who don't agree with the current system and want to crash it down are also there. That's why this word dark web comes from there. But now, when they wanted to transact amongst each other, they ended up creating this superior technology, which we now call blockchain, because they wanted to transact and they didn't want to do it in currency because then the government could track them. So then they created this ledger-based system, which later on was called blockchain, and then Bitcoin made a product out of that, and then Ethereum created a product out of that, and then the rest is history. All of that is in front of us. So that's where the blockchain comes from. That's where the Bitcoin comes from. So Vaibhav, can you tell me what is it that interests you in banking? Because banking is a very, very Vinodji also. So what is your interest in banking? From the debt side, from the borrowing side, from the lending side, from the concept side, from the practical side, how to get a loan, or how to get a cash credit, or how to get a restructuring done? What is it that interests you? Dangers. Okay. So Vinodji is interested in danger. Vaibhav is interested in borrowing side. Cautions. Okay. So Vinodji, when you say cautions, are you referring to cautions of depositing money? Because I think that's what largely you're doing, depositing money. So depositing. So you would like to know how to take caution about depositing money. Okay. And Vaibhav would like to know about borrowing side. So we have covered a lot about deposits. Let's just discuss a little bit about borrowing side, borrowing traps. Okay. So the first borrowing trap that you will get from a bank is that this money is cheap money. So take it and use it. That's one of the traps. They'll get you to mortgage something. They'll give you a term loan on something, and that'll be a borrowing trap. But we'll get into that in detail. In borrowing side, Weber, what is your interest? What would you like to know? Would you like to borrow, or have you already borrowed, and would you like to get into details of that? Okay. So I'm getting a few answers about I will need to borrow, we will need to borrow. So let's just get into the basics of borrowing. Okay. Every bank, the answers that I'm getting, can you tell me, are you entrepreneurs who are borrowing, or are you looking at borrowing in terms of individual, as an individual? How are you borrowing? How would you like to borrow for business? Okay. So for borrowing, there are thumb rules. Okay. We are discussing right now very generic thumb rules that a bank will tell you that if I'm giving you a cash credit, then it will be at 20% of your turnover. Let's say you're doing a turnover of 100 rupees and you're a profit making company and you're able to service my interest, then I'll give you 20 rupees because, as your working capital, for your working capital requirement, I'll give you 20 rupees. Okay. That's one method. Then there are, of course, other methods where a bank can lend you money. Okay. Where a bank will give you money of, let's say, up to sometimes 50% of your turnover. Like I have many cases where we worked with and we got them 50% of their turnover. Because remember, a bank is not just looking at what you do right now. Okay. Practically, the bank is always looking at what you will do. Okay. You may be at position A right now, but in the future, if you are likely to reach position B, then a bank will take a call on that. And that is basically known as CMA data. How many of you heard of CMA data? Can you please type C in the chat box? So some of us have done this exercise about CMA data. So I'll just brief in a very short thing about what is CMA data. Forget about the word CMA and forget about that term. What the bank is trying to understand when they are trying to lend you money is that you are right now in Mumbai. Okay, where will you be 3 years from now? Okay, will you be in Delhi? Will you be in Calcutta? Or are you going to stay in Mumbai only? So if you're going to grow from, let's say, 100 to, let's say, 200 in 3 years, then the bank finds that interesting because that is what is known as projection. Bank finds that interesting because then they think that you are growing and everybody wants to lend you money when you don't need it. Repeat after me. Okay. A bank will lend you money when you do not need it. Supposing your books show that you need money, the banks will not lend it to you. Are you with me? If you're with me, please type yes in the chat box. Okay. So if the bank thinks that you need the money, then they will put their foot down. नहीं, ये तो बहुत risky है. आपको हम देंगे तो आप वापस कैसे करोगे? ये तो नहीं हो सकता. ये तो नहीं. सोचेंगे इसके बारे में सोचेंगे. क्रेडिट कमेटी के पास जाएगा, इसको पूछेंगे, उसको पूछेंगे. Not eligible. Yeah, so it's not just about eligibility. Okay. I'm not taking names now in the chat box. I'm just going to use whatever you're putting as comments and reply to that. It's not about eligibility. It's not just about eligibility. It's also about risk as paying back. Yes, very true. Because if the bank thinks a bank will close umbrella and yes, very true. That is so true, Nikita. I think that's a nice way to describe it. If you do not need the money, the bank will run after you with the money. But supposing you say that my business is in trouble and I'd like to have some support and we're going to come out of it in a year or 2 years and I'm falling short, then the bank is going to ask you 1,000 questions. Why do you want money? What will you do with the money? When will you give it back? How will you give it back? What will be your source of income? And this and that and hajar cheez they will ask you. Ye mortgage rakho, phir bhi nahi hoga, because bank doesn't care about what you're mortgaging. That's not the bank's business. The lender, that is the institutional lender, which is like a bank who is giving you a debt. We're not discussing equity right now. We're discussing debt participation by a bank. So when a bank is participating as a debt giver, he's only interested in, can you pay me back? That's all he's interested in. He is not interested in anything else. आपका asset value 100 crore का है, लेकिन आपका loan 10 lakh का है. I don't care. तुम्हारा asset value क्या है? My interest is that will you be able to pay back my 10 lakhs along with my interest? Because I don't want to get into this whole thing about selling your asset and, you know, getting into SARFAESI and going to DRT and doing this, doing that. Who wants to get into collection? Because nobody wants to do that. So the banker always has a caution in his mind, a banker's perception. I will not lend you money if you need it. But if your books show, okay, now here's the catch. If your books show that you can pay me back, that is, you have not fixed assets, but current assets. So how many of you know the difference between fixed assets and current assets? Can you please type F in the chat box? In a business, the bank is looking at your stock and debtors. For them, that's your current assets. Why? Because it's liquid, they can immediately encash it, and they know that you have income. But if you have gold, that's not your income. That's a fixed asset. For them, it's a movable asset. Sure, it's a movable asset, but it's not your income. You can get a loan against gold. Nobody's saying no to that. Like you will get loan against a property. They're not saying no to that. But a bank is looking at what is your income producing asset. So a current asset is typically an income producing asset, which means that your stock can be sold and liquidity can be generated. Yes, Vaibhavji. It could be slow liquidity, but still it is your income. It is your income. Remember that. The bank is looking at your ability to pay from your income, not from debt, not from selling an asset. So let's say you have an asset of 50 lakhs and you are saying bank ko ki mere ko sirf 5 lakh ka loan chahiye. Bank is not going to look at your 50 lakh asset and say, "Are 50 lakh ka asset hai, de do 5 lakh." Not like that. Your ability to pay back 5 lakhs within a 3-year term loan, let's say you're taking a 3-year term loan, you should have income in your books that can show that you will be able to pay these 5 lakhs back to me through income, not through selling your assets. Bank is not interested in that. That is not income. For the bank, that is not income. You may say, मेरा asset है, मैं आपको बेच के दे दूंगा. So bank will say, तुमको पैसा जरूरत है तो तुम बेच के ले लो पैसा. मेरे से लोन क्यों लेना है तुमको? If you want a loan from a bank, if you're applying for a loan for a facility, a banker is truly interested in your income. What's your income? What's your income right now? What was your income earlier? And what is your projected income, let's say 3 years from now? What is it likely to be? Because when we are in business, the income is always kind of, you know, the bank always expects that your income will increase. If it wants to lend you, then it wants to know in 3 years how much your income will be, and then how much will be your ability to pay back my loan through your income. That's why current assets are the most important thing for a banker. Your fixed assets, like your gold or your property or anything else that is there as a machinery, you know, whatever else is there, this is just comfort. I'm not using technical words here like security and mortgage and this and that. Very simple. We're keeping it simple. For the banker, that is comfort. आपके पास 1 crore का property है, that is comfort for him or her. It's just comfort. Okay, in case the loan goes bad and if you can't pay or if your income goes down or the world's business cycle goes down or whatever happens, at least, you know, there's comfort. You know, I'm giving you a 50 lakh loan, but you have a property of 1 crore. So chalo, kuch nahi to I will sell the property and I may be able to recover at least most of my loan which I gave you. But that's not the basis of sanction. That's not the basis of getting the loan unless it's a LAP. And even if it is a LAP, okay, even if a LAP is loan against property, even if it is a LAP, even if it is loan against property, the bank is not giving you money on the basis of the value of your property. How many of you agree? Can you press type A in the chat box? Okay. A few of us do. But your property may be, let's say your property is 1 crore. Okay. Now, let's say you're telling the bank that I have this business. My business is right now at 20 lakhs and I'm giving you property and you give me against the property of 1 crore, you give me 90 lakhs. Let's say 10% is the margin they keep. In most cases, it is 60%. That is very true. That is very true. LTV, you know, that's called, Nikita ji, that's called LTV. loan to value. But remember, it's not at 60% only. Okay, it can be 80%, it can be 100%, it can be 200%, it can be 300%. The value of the loan that the banker gives you has to do with his confidence in your business, not only on your property. Your property could be low value, but you may have great business model. He may not be able to justify to his committee, so he may ask you to give you additional collateral. He may say, give me more property, it will help me to convince the committee. But bankers have been known to take calls to give loans beyond the value of the property. Your property is valued at 100, and a bank could have gradually increased their share in your cash credit from 100 to 120, 150. Reliance got for Jio. So Reliance in Jio, sir, is a very different example, because Reliance, what it got for Jio was a sanction from the government of India for 1.5 lakh crores. They were given this sanction under the Startup India scheme. If you remember, the Prime Minister launched certain Startup India schemes. So Reliance was declared in the books as a startup. That is, Reliance Jio was declared as a startup. And that's how they got 1.5 lakh crores from the government of India. And that's what was used. That is basically the taxpayers' money was used to fund these free data and the free voice that you got as an incentive in the first 2 years of Reliance launching, first 2-3 years of Reliance launching. So Reliance eventually later on got debt from the banks later on, but that was to fund its additional schemes and to take over the market and to to kind of beat the incumbents by giving freebies. Because when you're giving free things, obviously the incumbents like Vodafone and Idea and so many people packed up, because you cannot run you cannot run a non-profit enterprise for so long if you don't get support from your investors or from bankers. So that's another story. It's a very complex model. We'll have to come to that as a separate session, Vaibhavji. But we're just talking about the generic way a bank works. That a bank can lend you money more than your property value. Also, that depends on your business model. That depends on your income. At the same time, even if you have a property of 1 crore, a bank may not give you 40 lakhs. If your business model does not show that you can pay back these 40 lakhs in that term loan which is giving you, or a cash credit that he is giving you, if you cannot pay back that income to him every year or every month, let's say it's a cash credit and there is an interest on you of, let's say, 10 lakhs a month, okay, or 5 lakhs a month, and if your income is showing at only 3 lakhs a month, he's not going to give you that money, because he's thinking, "Tum 3 lakh kamayega, mera 5 lakh kaise dega?" You may say that my property is 1 crore. He says, yes, but I will still not give you the money, because I will give you only what you can pay me back. That's the only money I'm going to give you. That's what a banker starts off with you. That's how the banker's thought process is, because he's trying to understand. He doesn't want a defaulting person on his books right away. Current cash flow and future potential. That is very true. That's very true. Current cash flow is very important for them. What are your current cash flows? What's your current income? Traditionally, bankers do not ask for cash flow per se. Some bankers do ask for it. Like if you reached a level of discussion with a head credit of a bank, he may ask you for a cash flow just to know how your cash is coming in and going out. That's okay. What a banker is trying to understand is that what is your profitability? What is the profits in your books? What is your sales? What is your debt to equity ratio? That is how much debt you have on the books, and what is the equity that you brought in as partners capital or stuff like that. So banker is trying to understand what's your income right now, and let's say 3 years from now, what is your income going to be? And whatever you projected in your 3-year income statement, which is typically called a CMA data, or you can call it whatever else you want to call it, projection or whatever you say in that, the banker will take that holistic view and understand that this is the maximum that he can give you, so that it ensures the survival of your business. You can take care of your expenses, you can take care of your personal needs, and you can pay back the bank comfortably over an X period of time, depending on whether it's a cash credit or depending on whether it's a term loan. whether it is for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 20-year home loan, whatever it is. The value of the asset is only comfort, cash flow, and sensitivity analysis. Yes, they will give this many names. You know, they will always beware of bankers' jargons. Okay, they will give you many names. I mean, like I keep hearing so many jargons when every banker has this, you know, fancy way of putting it that, you know, this is that, this is this. But basically, please understand, वो ये समझना चाहता है कि आप कितने पानी में हो. That's what he wants to understand. कि आपके पास कितना पैसा है. अगर आपके पास पैसा है, तो मैं आपको पैसा दूंगा. अगर आपके पास पैसा नहीं है, तो मैं आपको पैसा नहीं दूंगा. That's the thumb rule. That's how a banker thinks. So if you have current assets, if you have stock, if you have debtors, if you have a business model, if you have profits, and you just have a working capital gap, okay, that is your collection is coming slow, or your stock is getting sold slow, or you're holding a stock for quite long, you know, whatever is your holding period, and there is a mismatch between your you need the money, let's say now, and your money is going to come 60 days from now. So there is a 60-day liquidity mismatch. Okay. So banker will fund you for those 60 days. He calls this the working capital gap in his technical language. Doesn't matter what his technical language is. Basically, what he's trying to understand is why you need the money. It's not just a question of eligibility. Why you need the money. So you may have great assets. You may be very eligible. But if you don't have a working capital gap, then why should I fund you? Why you need the money? What are you going to do with the money? If you're going to take the money and invest in the stock market, I'm not going to give you the money. If you're going to take the money and deploy it in your business to increase your business and grow, and hence as a result pay me my interest and also earn income for yourself and for your employees and for everybody else, towards that activity, the bank would be willing to lend money. That's generally the principle with which a bank works. I'm not saying practically that's how the bank lends money, but that's how banking principles work. That's what is going on in his head, in the banker's head. That can you pay me back? Do you have the income to support it? Remember, if he gives you 100 rupees, he's expecting 120 rupees back from you. So he needs to know that when he gives you 100, you will be able to give that extra 20 rupees back to him by next year. Otherwise, he will have an NPA on his books. He doesn't want that. That's why he's looking at your income. That's why he's looking at your ability to pay. That is why he's checking so many things. It's not just about your asset. It's not just about how much stock you have or how much debtors you have. It's also about your ability to pay, which is defined by your working capital gap. So that working capital gap will define for him that what is the amount he can give you. Let's say you have a great business, very profitable, then why you need money from me? Also remember that. Now you may tell the bank that I'm making great money, look at my balance sheet, I have lots of money, I have cash coming in, cash going out, everything is superb. And the banker will ask you, "Arey bhai, tumhara sab kuch acha chal raha hai. There is no working capital gap. You are getting advance from your customers, your creditors are giving you 180 days credit, that you have a great asset of 1 crore. Why you want money?" You understand? That's how the banker thinks, that there should be a gap. That is, there has to be a space for me to participate as a banker. Then if there is a space for me to participate in your growth story, and as a result, if I can make money from that story, I definitely would like to take part. That's how the banker is approaching you when you're meeting him. He doesn't care about your balance sheet as such. I mean, not just about your balance sheet, not just about stock, not just about debtors, not just about the fixed assets or the collateral or the gold or whatever. He's looking at ability to pay, and the working capital gap defines how much he will lend you. That is for a business enterprise.
So we understood about blockchain. We understood why blockchain is picking up. Jeet sir had a wonderful query. Ganiji is in real mood today. Very happy to notice comments. So yes, it's a gray area in India even today. It's not very clear. Supreme Court has overruled RBI's ban, but still now it is not very clear. And then we moved on to say that is the way it is going to be, because modern day banking people are trusting the origin of money. I loved the way Chaitanya ji came back saying that you may. Then one more point that was mentioned clearly is when we talk about banking, we just looked at the borrowing side. The concepts explained were LTV, loan to value. Then we talked about what are the sort of loans that you can get from the bank. At this stage, we'll stop for today. What I've deliberately done is thank you, Nikita ma'am, also for joining in. I'm requesting a practitioner consultant to now come in and talk about CC and working capital loans. Incidentally, right, the idea was very simple. Today, Chaitanya ji will set the base, right, and he has done an amazing job, right. So he has picked up into banking, and as mentioned by the dear colleague, again a wonderful practitioner. It's a very vast topic. So now we will come back, right, in the next session, and we will next session itself we will continue by looking at what are these ratios, what do banks look like, what should you be careful about. For that, I'm going to call a practitioner. My sincere thanks to Nikita ma'am, who actually initiated. Chaitanya ji knows this background. So these sessions have been inspired by Nikita ma'am, who called me and said, sir, thank you, Chaitanya Bete, wonderfully came back saying thank you for that answer. It is, thank you again, Chaitanya. God bless you, Bache. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all of you. Be safe. We meet again on Friday. Pleasure, Bete. Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you again.